The Jewish Channel's Week in Review. A child's murder in Brooklyn shakes the Jewish community. America's Jewish community says farewell to an Italian emissary. Old Jews telling jokes. And more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. A child's murder is shaking up the Jewish communities of New York because the killer of the Orthodox child is allegedly a member of his own Orthodox community in Brooklyn. The 8-year-old child, Libby Kletsky, was first reported missing on Monday when he didn't return home from school with other children. After a frantic 2-day search, police found what they believe to be the boy's dismembered remains in the trash bin and refrigerator of another member of the Orthodox Jewish community who lives mere blocks from the boy's home. A 35-year-old Orthodox man, reportedly named Levi Aaron, picture shown here, was taken into custody at 2 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday. Police say he likely suffocated the boy before dismembering him and then went to work the next day as normal. Police also say there is no reason to assume the victim was known to the suspect previously and that the suspect, while in custody, made statements implicating himself in the death of the boy. Police found video of the boy leaving a school building just 6 blocks away from his home on Monday afternoon, but he never arrived there. It was the first time his parents let him walk home from school on his own after the boy had been begging for the opportunity to do so. At the little boy's funeral Wednesday night, thousands gathered for miles around. Community leaders eulogized the child and spoke of the tragedy, and others led recitations of psalms. After the casket was taken away, community members spoke with TJC's Meredith Gansman about the tragedy.
It's a very sad feeling for the whole family, for the whole community, and for everybody that such a story should happen here in Brooklyn.
I came out here to show support. The community is very banded together to show support for the family, and as a Jewish nation, we always support each other. And this is a terrible, tragic story with this little boy, and we need to continue to show support and always be united as a Jewish people.
For the thousands gathered in Brooklyn, the tragedy of Libby Kletsky was striking. In lesser tragedies, 4 synagogues around the globe were damaged this week, 3 of them by apparent hate crimes. A synagogue in Moscow was attacked with firebombs on Tuesday morning. Moscow police reportedly believe the acts were perpetrated by a neo-Nazi gang in response to the conviction of several members of the gang for hate killings of 27 people. No one was hurt in this attack, and the synagogue, Darchei Shalom, suffered light damage on its exterior. In Florida, the traditional congregation of Mount Dora was vandalized with hate words and symbols spray-painted on its walls. The graffiti was removed by local residents when congregants, in observance of the Jewish Sabbath, explained that they could not immediately remove it themselves. A similar crime was committed in Danville, Virginia, where swastikas were painted on the door and sidewalk of Temple Beth Shalom. But one historic congregation won't be so quick to recover. The 109-year-old Kehilath Jeshurun in New York suffered a 4-alarm fire this week that left it heavily damaged. The synagogue's rabbi, Haskell Lookstein, told reporters that the blaze had destroyed the roof and caused the sanctuary's ceiling to cave in. Initial investigation suggests the fire was an accident, and the synagogue reports that it is insured for accidental fires. No one was harmed as the synagogue was empty and undergoing renovations. The synagogue's Torah scrolls were also not in the building at the time of the fire and were also unharmed. Moving on, whatever you may or may not have to say about settlements in Israel's West Bank could significantly restrict your freedoms of speech and assembly in the Jewish state. Israel's Knesset passed an anti-boycott law this week, which penalizes any individual, corporation, or organization that calls for or participates in a boycott relating to Israel, the settlements, or the occupation of the Palestinian territories. An individual who calls for a boycott of goods from the settlements can now be sued for financial damages. Companies that refuse to purchase goods produced in the settlements could lose government contracts, and advocacy organizations calling for a boycott could lose their nonprofit status and be called upon to pay taxes. It's a law that's raising great concern among many, and even has the right-wing Jerusalem Post disagreeing in an editorial headlined "The Bad Boycott Bill." Elsewhere in Israel, a different kind of exclusion saw women banned from an ultra-Orthodox conference that hosted government leaders at a facility owned in part by the government and the Jewish Agency. The conference was a business forum hosted by the ultra-Orthodox Israeli newspaper Hamodia, and women reportedly arrived at the conference expecting to attend, but were turned away and told the event was for men only. Government officials who attended the conference included Finance Minister Yuval Steinitz and Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat. The convention hall at which the conference took place is owned in part by the city of Jerusalem and also in part by the Jewish Agency. Looking at a very different story about the Jewish state, Israel's relationship with Italy was celebrated at an event for the departing Italian Consul General. Rebecca Honig-Friedman reports.
The special relationship between the Italian government and the American Jewish community was highlighted this week at a luncheon held by the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations to honor departing Italian Consul General to New York, Francesco Maria Tallo. Former ambassador to Italy and personal friend of Tallo's, Professor Richard Gardner, summed up the impression Tallo has made.
To the widest community of New York, you have been very important. You will be remembered. That can't be said of all consuls general.
It's unusual for the Conference of Presidents, a group that represents the organized Jewish community, to pay such an honor to a foreign diplomat who is neither Jewish nor Israeli, but Chair Richard Stone explained that Ambassador Tallo is no ordinary diplomat.
He reached out to the Jewish community in a very strong way, devoted a lot of time and energy to building a relationship between the Italian people, the Italian government, and the Jewish community in New York, and really the world Jewish community, including Israel.
Special efforts noted by community leaders included a 2009 Conference of Presidents mission to Rome that Ambassador Tallo helped organize, where Jewish community leaders met with everyone from the Italian Prime Minister to the Pope, and an annual Holocaust memorial program that Ambassador Tallo held on the sidewalk in front of the Italian consulate on the International Day of Remembrance on January 27th. Former conference chair Harold Tanner said he was especially moved that Tallo held the event last year, even when a snowstorm led the UN to cancel its own commemoration, and that Tallo personally stood outside in the dead of winter while the names of all the Italians who perished in the Holocaust were read aloud.
You don't forget when somebody has done something that they didn't have to do, that is very meaningful. And that was very meaningful to me and the other people who participated, and you did not have to do it.
Ambassador Tallo, who was leaving New York to assume the post of Italy's special envoy for Afghanistan and Pakistan, said he saw connecting to the Jewish community as an important part of his job as Consul General, whose role is to promote Italy to all New Yorkers.
As an Italian, the opportunities are so many because we have such a large and important presence in this city. But in the same time, the other big presence is the Jewish community.
For more on the luncheon celebrating Italian Consul General Francesco Maria Tallo, please watch the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Rebecca. From celebrating someone leaving to celebrating something new, Christian Needon attended an event for a new kosher restaurant that hopes to serve the movers and shakers of Wall Street.
The canyons of Wall Street just got a little more kosher. That's because the newly opened Milk Street Cafe, housed within 40 Wall Street's Trump Building, is an Orthodox Union-supervised kosher eatery serving meat, milk, and parve dishes. The Jewish Channel got a tour of Milk Street's sprawling 23,000-square-foot facility from owner Mark Epstein, who said he takes a marketing approach that he calls transparent kosher.
The non-kosher person comes in and sees a food hall with a beautiful assortment of different kinds of food choices that he can or she can pick from. And the kosher person sees, oh, here's dairy food over here, here's parve food here, and here's meat food over here. And that way, everybody's happy. And the kosher person's even happier because he sees the person sitting next to him is here because the food is good, not because he has to eat here.
Epstein said he honed Milk Street Cafe's transparent kosher format at his first location in Boston.
In Boston, kosher people are just 5% of our business. So that's where we learned we had to compete in the real world in order to survive. And we're taking that concept and bringing it here to New York, where we want to really appeal to everybody.
To see more from the Jewish Channel's tour of the Milk Street Cafe, please tune in to the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. Finally, old Jews telling jokes is more than just a way of describing our viewership. Christian Needon reports.
Laughter was in the air at 92Y Tribeca in Lower Manhattan this week, as the founder of website Old Jews Telling Jokes was on hand to promote a new book version of the hundreds of jokes he's compiled over 3 years from Jews aged 60 and up. But he told the full house that there is more to his project than simply collecting jokes from old Jews.
These are not only old Jews telling jokes, but in many cases they are old Jews telling old jokes. Yes. The point isn't really whether you've heard them before, but rather that you have heard them before. The joy of the jokes is the manner of the telling, the warm comfort of the familiar, and what the jokes reveal about the culture that has produced them.
And the joke tellers on Hoffman's website, oldjewstellingjokes.com, throw out punchlines in a white room with a small off-screen audience. And even after 3 years, some 500 jokes, and a past season filmed out in Hollywood, Hoffman reiterated the strictness of his criteria for both age and Jewishness.
I had a guy come in who was 58, and I let him tell some jokes, but I'm not actually going to put him on the site for 2 years. In terms of the Jewish part, I'll take your word for it. I'm not going to check. If you say you're Jewish, or we had one guy named Ed McCurdy. He told me he was Jewish by marriage. That was good enough for me. It's really more the spirit of it than the actual literal religious practice.
He added that you can tell a lot about a generation of Jews by the jokes they tell.
Because I limit the joke tellers to those age 60 or older, some of these things might be time capsules. You know, jokes are preserved in a way that most other oral exchanges are not preserved. You know, somebody tells a joke in 1965 and it works and it lands and it's funny. You know what? That sucker gets passed around for 50 years.
For more from the founder of Old Jews Telling Jokes, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. IO Optimum Channel 291, Time Warner Cable Channel 528, RCN Channel 268, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Cable Channel 1, and new this month, Bright House Channel 330. For more information, visit tjctv.com.